Now, we've got members in the room today, but I think we've also opened this up, as I understand it, to members of the public in Torquay. So just so I understand who I'm talking to, can you put your hands up if you're not members of UKIP? Right, would you lock that door? And lock that door as well. And I don't care what the members think about me today, but I'm really addressing those of you, members of the public, that have come along to this meeting. My guess is that many of you will probably never have been to a party political meeting in your lives before, because one of the most remarkable things about the growth of UKIP, and we've come from sort of 2 or 3% in the polls to getting very close to winning by-elections, to getting a quarter of the vote across the country in the county council elections last year. One of the remarkable things is, yes, we pick up our votes from disgruntled Conservatives, people who look at Dave. Well, that's what he likes to be called. He's a man of the people, isn't he? So, yeah, we get Conservatives that vote for us, and, of course, you know, they look at the modern-day Conservative Party and they say, well, hang on, we used to have a Conservative Party that talked about enterprise and business and success and trade, and now we have a Conservative Party who in office seem to have been far more motivated by building wind farms wherever they can and pushing through gay marriage despite it not being in the manifesto. We also pick up Liberal Democrat votes. Now, the growth of the Lib Dems was a remarkable phenomenon. It seemed that people voted Lib Dem because they were nice. And that was the image they put. They were nice. But nobody ever knew what the Lib Dem stood for. And there were lots of opinion polls that showed that actually a majority of Lib Dem voters, and particularly here in the southwest, a majority of Lib Dem voters were actually strongly Eurosceptic, were always opposed to Britain joining the euro, and yet they were voting Lib Dem. But now, of course, the Lib Dems are in office, and now people do know what they stand for, and they don't want to vote for them again. So we pick up support from the Liberal Democrats too. And perhaps the biggest change over the course of the last year is that we're now beginning to pick up Labour votes, and particularly in the Midlands and towards the north of the country, we're now picking up old Labour votes from working families, families upon whom the impact of mass immigration has fundamentally changed their communities, their job prospects and their income, and yet there's nobody in the modern-day Labour Party or the trade union movement prepared to stand up and defend their interests. So we're picking up a big lump of old Labour votes too, and that's good news. But perhaps the most amazing phenomenon is that 1 in 5 UKIP voters, 20% of the UKIP vote, comes from people who are non-voters, comes from people who have not voted for at least 20 years. In many cases, it comes from people who've never voted in their lives. And we are re-engaging these people in democracy. They're going down to the polling station and voting. And I think we should be very proud of the fact that we're actually bringing people back into politics and caring about their country. Now, it's been quite a long journey. This party was actually founded 20 years ago, and it took us a long time to really get anywhere, and we had series after series of miserable election results. But of course, the problem was that the message we were trying to give the British public then, most people just weren't ready for it, or didn't really believe it was going to happen, or didn't want to believe that it was going to happen. Because what we've been saying since the early mid-1990s is that if you're members of the European Union, it is no longer a common market. Do you remember that phrase? Common market? I'll bet there's 1 or 2 in this room that voted yes in 1975, believing they were going to get a common market. Well, you know, it wasn't that, was it? It's become a political union. So we've been warning that if we're part of this, we'd lose the ability to govern ourselves. It would cost us a great deal of money. It would cost us global influence, and it would lead ultimately to a massive upsurge in immigration. And people didn't believe us. And then when we started to do a little bit better and get MEPs elected in the European Parliament elections and starting to win districts and county council seats, Well, then really what we've had, I would say, for the last 10 years is derision, mockery and derision. You know, because we don't hold with the establishment politically correct view of the world, we're all a bunch of nutcases. We're all fruitcakes, cranks, gadflies, eccentrics. And I'm sure most of you, members of the public that have come in here today, aren't cranks or freaks or eccentrics. You're just people that actually care about your country, care about its future, and I'm guessing most of you share with us. You know, I myself, I had never, ever planned to be in politics. I left school at 18, I bypassed university, went straight to work in the City of London, and, you know, unlike Clegg and Cameron and Miliband, who've never done a day's work in their lives because they went straight into research offices from Oxford and Cambridge, you know, I can actually say that I've worked in the private sector, I've run my own company, I have some real knowledge of what the world is like. And I can also say that I worked damned hard in the City of London for 20 years, up until lunchtime, every single day. Well, you know, chap's got to have a hobby. What motivated me to get into politics was when we joined the exchange rate mechanism. When we pegged sterling against the Deutschmark back in 1990, I thought it was utter lunacy to do so, and within 2 years, we had one of the worst self-inflicted recessions in this country because we were totally out of kilter with our interest rates. They were roughly double where they should have been. So that motivated me to get involved in politics, and I'm in politics above all because I believe that the best people to govern Britain are the British people themselves, and it's wholly unacceptable for EU institutions to now make 75% of our laws every year. We want that power back in this country. And just look at what giving away these powers has meant. You know, there was a big debate in the House of Commons the other week where a number of backbench MPs were trying to push through a motion to say that we should be able to deport foreign criminals. I think they're right, don't you? You know, we should be able to deport foreign criminals, but we can't deport foreign criminals because we're signed up to the say-so of a court based in Strasbourg. We now will have to give prisoners the vote. Now, I personally think that if you get convicted of a crime and put in prison, you surrender your liberty for that period of time, and that liberty should include your right to vote for that period of time. Seems common sense to me. And yet, prisoners in this country will either get the vote or be paid substantial sums in compensation for the elections they've not been allowed to vote in. Again, nothing we can do about it, all the while we're members of the European Union. We're living through a period where we're told we must tighten our belts. You know, we must not go on spending the amount of money we have been, and yet we seem to be happy to give £55 million a day as a membership fee to the European Union, and the UKIP argument is that money will be better off spent here in this country. Oh, and while we're at it, and not directly EU related, we also give away £25 million a day in foreign aid. We give away nearly £1 billion a month in foreign aid, £11 billion a year. Of that, £2 billion is spent on what we would genuinely call humanitarian aid. It's providing clean water. It's providing inoculations. So I'm perfectly happy that we go on giving £2 billion a year for genuine humanitarian reasons. I am not happy that we go on giving £9 billion a year, frankly, to prop up and seek influence with all sorts, in many cases, of dodgy regimes all across the world. I mean, what in God's name are we giving money to India for? I mean, India, do you know India have got aircraft carriers with aeroplanes on them? How about that? I was with William in Boroughbridge the day before yesterday, looking at this fairly grisly scene of the floods on the Somerset levels, which of course are going to take months and months for the water to disappear, and goodness knows how long the clean-up operation will take. And we discussed this foreign aid idea, because an idea that I put out there that I think has got some quite broad support in this country is I've said, look, these floods are a really unusual, large-scale disaster, and why don't we just take a small percentage of the foreign aid budget and say that to help our farmers and to help our householders in Somerset, in the Thames Valley and everywhere else, that we ought to say, for once, charity begins at home. And William and I were joined there by a chap called Alan Dimmock, and Alan is a Somerset County Councillor for UKIP, and Alan was asked, do you agree with Nigel's idea? And Alan said, well, when you think about it, he said, we give all this money to India for them to send a spaceship to Mars to see if they can discover water. All they got to do is come here. I like that. What's good? So I know the people of Yeovil are being well represented by Mr. Dimmock, because he's got a good sense of humour. But perhaps the issue that has really brought home to people why being a member of the European Union has left us unable to control our own lives and our own communities is the issue of immigration. I'm sure you all saw the figures that were released 2 days ago. A year-on-year increase of net migration into Britain of 40%. And nearly 100% of that 40% came from member states of the European Union. We have a government that gave us a target a few years ago. Do you remember? Dave was going to cut immigration from hundreds of thousands a year to tens of thousands a year. Well, it isn't working, it isn't happening, and frankly, it is pointless to have immigration targets. All you're doing by having targets is conning the public that we actually have a degree of control over this when we have a total open door to the whole of southern and eastern Europe. And what we say in UKIP is we are not against immigration, and we are most certainly not against immigrants. And if I was a young man living in Romania, I'd come to this country. Don't blame them for doing it. After all, you come here, the minimum wage is 9 times higher than it is in Romania, and within a few months you'll qualify for child benefit, for housing benefit, a health system that is infinitely better than the one at home, and an education system for free for your children. I don't blame people from Romania or Bulgaria or anywhere else for wanting to better their lives, but when I see the impact, a doubling of youth unemployment since 2004, and wage compression, meaning that people in jobs all over this country are actually taking home less money than they were 10 years ago because of the massive oversupply in what has now become a distorted labour market. I don't want to take it out on people from Eastern Europe, but I do want to take it out on people in Westminster who haven't lifted a finger to stop open-door immigration on this scale. And the truth of it is, we cannot be members of the European Union and have our own border controls and have our own immigration policy. And I'm saying to people that 83 days from now, we have on May the 22nd a European election, and there are 3 parties you can vote for if you want to maintain open-door immigration into Britain, and there's 1 party you can vote for if you want to say enough's enough, it's time we took back control of our lives, our destiny and our borders, and that really is our message to people. Use these European elections to tell the political establishment you've had enough of the direction that they've been taking you in. That's what the opportunity is on May the 22nd. Now, there's much else that needs changing in Britain. We certainly need to change our education system, because it is clearly grossly unfair that the 7% of people whose parents are rich enough to send them to the private schools are now dominating our public life in a way we've never seen before. You know, they dominate not just politics, They dominate the civil service. They dominate the media. They even dominate sport. You know, look at the England cricket team. Look at the fact that half our gold medalists in the Olympics went to private schools. So the fact that the 7% who've got wealthy parents are doing very well is fine. And it would be madness to do anything to try to damage those private schools that are doing a good job for their kids. I mean, that would be mad. That is the politics of envy and will get us nowhere. But what about the rest? Well, there are some very good schools in this country, and there are some kids that do well. But just think about it. If you've got a bright 11-year-old boy or girl, and you're living in one of the big cities, and you're being sent to one of the comprehensives, in which perhaps there are 20, or 30, or 40, or 50 different languages being spoken, where there is a general breakdown, I'm afraid, of discipline and law and order, much of which has come as a result of family breakdown and many other things, what chance has that 11-year-old boy or girl with a high IQ got of getting to the best universities, of reaching a top degree, and of getting one of the top jobs? Frankly, they've got less chance than they had 50 years ago. 50 years ago, half the students that went to Oxford and Cambridge came from what would be described as working-class backgrounds. Today, that figure has fallen to 12%. So actually what's happening is every year there are tens of thousands of our brightest young men and women who are not achieving, in educational terms, their full ability. And what we as a party absolutely believe in is that though it may seem unfair, although life, of course, has a habit of being unfair, but though it may seem unfair, actually, getting rid of the grammar school system in this country was one of the greatest acts of social vandalism we have seen since World War II. And I also want to say one word about one other policy area that I think is really important and can only grow in time, and it is linked to the European Union. Everybody in Brussels believes that carbon dioxide emissions are leading to a rising of global temperatures, and that this threatens the future of mankind, and that we must do something about it. Well, I have to say, I'm pretty agnostic on this. You know, I don't know. I really don't know. I do know that one major volcanic eruption will put more CO2 into the atmosphere than people driving 4x4s through Chelsea. I mean, that bit I do know. And I also know that there's been no global warming now for 17 years. That I also know. But what I'm certain of is that what we've done in this country, by signing up to a series of targets in Brussels, what we've done is to give the people of this country and our businesses, and particularly our manufacturers, we've given them very expensive electricity, right? And we've done it. And why have we done it? We've done it because we are subsidizing the renewables program. So here's how it works. Every one of you in this room pays a 10% surcharge on your electricity bill. Incidentally, by 2020, that will be a 20% surcharge with all the planned future increases. So you're paying a 10% surcharge so that people like David Cameron's father-in-law can be paid £1,000 a day for just having wind turbines on his land. That is the level of utter stupidity that we've reached with wind energy in this country. The poorest are actually giving money to the richest in our society for an energy that is not reliable because the wind doesn't always blow, and when it blows too strong, they have to switch them off, otherwise they catch fire. So you're all paying a lot of money so that the rich can get richer. But the impact on manufacturing is in some ways even more serious. You know, there is the one INEOS chemical plant up at Runcorn uses more electricity than the whole of Liverpool. Gives you an idea of just how much energy manufacturing companies need. And over the course of the last 3 years, both of the UK-based aluminium smelters have closed. Much of our steel production has closed and gone elsewhere. And we're doing all this at the very same time when the Americans have gone for shale gas in an absolutely massive way, and when the Chinese are mining coal on a scale that is so vast that between China and India, they are building 4 new coal-fired power stations every single week. Even if we thought that CO2 emissions were leading to a possible global disaster, why on earth would we close down much of our manufacturing industry, make you pay up to 20% more on your electricity bills, and make sure the rich get richer when this country only produces 2.5% of the carbon dioxide that is emitted in the world? Even if it is a problem, it isn't going to make any difference. So I hope I've given those of you that are not members here something of a flavour of who we are as a party, what we stand for, what we believe in. You know, we are not hidebound by political correctness like everybody else. We say what we think, and if people don't like it, well, do you know what? I couldn't care less, really. I believe our policies are based on common sense, and I believe that we in UKIP are shifting the centre of gravity in British politics. There would be no debate about a referendum of any kind at all if UKIP wasn't coming up on the rails and posing a threat to the establishment. We've done that. We've done that. And even 10 years ago, to even attempt to talk about the immigration issue in polite society was considered the most dreadful act. And how dare you? And you can't discuss immigration without being racist and without being nasty. Well, we have talked about immigration. And if you look at our candidate lists, you'll see there are plenty of members of the ethnic communities, people who've come to this country, settled in this country, integrated in this country, who agree 100% with us that open-door immigration must end, and we've made that argument a mainstream, respectable debate and argument in this country. And you'll see the slogan that we've got for this conference. Love Britain, vote UKIP. There were some in the media yesterday who tried to say that by using a slogan like this, you know, weren't we going down the same route as extremist parties in the past? Well, I remember in the past, I remember in the 1970s, the National Front adopted the Union Jack, didn't they? And for years, people were terrified to display the Union Jack in case they thought they might be National Front supporters. And they're trying to do the same thing to us with slogans like this. Well, I'm sorry, but we are unashamedly patriotic in this party. We believe in this country. We have pride and self-respect in our nation, and we want to hand that down to our children and grandchildren. So let's take back patriotism as a decent thing to believe in.